My name's Sancho. I make all sorts of Power Platform solutions at a company called Pinnacle Group. I do the internal work for them. It's not like we build for anyone else. I'm also a super user on the Power Apps community forums, and I'm one of the Power Apps champs. So what is the problem I think we're facing? Problem is we spend so much time changing all the controls in every single app, just hours and hours and hours, and then you expand that out collectively over the 2.5 million odd Power Apps developers, and it just ends up being massive amounts of times. So if you spend like 1 hour in your career and we expand that out to all the Power App developers, that equals 285 years of time we're all spending, which is just crazy. And then I do at least an hour a week of this in total, so expand that out, it ends up being like 13,000 years of time that we're all collectively spending every single year doing this. So there had to be a better way to do that. And the other problem is with color blindness and low vision. So Power Apps editor obviously has a lot of accessibility tools in it right now, but if you are colorblind or have low vision, there's no inbuilt functionality right now that will enable you to use an app that maybe someone has created badly. So if they created the contrast levels too low, you're not going to be able to see it. So I built a branding template, and I'll show you how I did that after I've shown you all the cool stuff. So let's get that loaded. So what I wanted to do was have a way for people to not have to spend that time branding all their apps. So if I create a new screen and then insert a few controls, let's get a pen input. That's what I wanted. And combo box. And a date picker. So why did I do the date picker? Because right now in the editor, unless you build your own date picker with a custom component or PCF control, it's just not going to be able to do what you want. So this bit here that's blue, if you change the colors of the date picker using the properties available, you actually can't change that. This will remain blue no matter what you choose in the settings. So, right, usual process now is we'd go through and we'd change, the color, the fill, border colors, hover colors, and we'd match to our company branding, and then possibly have a screen of these that we copy paste across to all the other places we're going to use them. But what it really should be is it should be as easy as you watched me insert those controls. I'm not doing anything weird here. I go to the theme picker, so I'd be able to navigate to this within the app during play mode, not just edit mode. And then I hit set theme, and it's done. That is how easy it should be to change your theme on the fly when we're using the editor and when we're using it in play.
That's awesome.
Right? So yeah, that's how it should be. So let me jump back to my default theme. And right, so one of the other things I fiddled with was the pen input, because as soon as you switch to a dark mode theme, you don't want that pen to still be writing in black. So if I swap out to back here, hey, there it is. So
That's
it just does
ridiculous.
that by default. Yeah, I know, right?
I can't wait to see how you did this under the hood.
And then the date picker is done. That was it. That's how easy it should be. It should just be you click, you change, and it's done. So I wanted to make that a lot easier for everyone. There's obviously some constraints. So I've worked with a primary, secondary, and tertiary color system. So, light, medium, and dark, and built all the properties of these around those. But you could extend it further or change it to whatever you want to be using the way I did it. But we'll get to that in a bit. So the other cool thing I did was a chart palette. So if we want to change the color of default charts, we can just pick the color of that box, hit set chart colors, and it's done. That's it. If I insert a new chart, it's done. And then a theme tester for example, I also included here, where all you do is change these 3 boxes to, you change their fill and their text color to your primary fills and text colors. You set a default label, and then whether or not it's dark mode. Dark mode only really affects the background. So if I look at the background of this object, you can see by default it's appearing as, if dark mode, then this color faded, otherwise that color faded. So if I insert a new screen, the same thing happens. If I insert a blank screen, that screen is now set to that fill. So anyway, yeah, so theme tester, you change a bunch of things here, like let's make that one a purple again. It'll show you what that's going to look like if you use those 3 colors together. Instead of going around and changing and fiddling all sorts of things, you should just be able to just go bam, 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 hit set theme, and it's done. So the other cool thing is, so controls are obviously very cool. I'm not sure a lot of people in the more experienced side of Power App makers probably use the new screens anymore, but anyone who's new to Power Apps is definitely going to be using these new screens, and you kind of want the same thing. So if let's go back to default theme, right? And I insert a new success screen, right? That's what we expect. And a new tutorial screen. Excellent. Go to my theme palette. Let's pop on a nice purple theme. And we go back to these screens and they're done. So no more fiddling around and changing all the little bits and pieces and every single control. And yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And the fact that it comes by default with this accessibility theme means right out the get-go, even if you're just building a simple app, as long as you keep these 2 options, these 2 accessibility theme options, your app will be accessible. I mean, you can test it obviously by just flicking between by hitting setting theme every time you start building things, but it just enables that out of the box. So for example, you can set this one. I've set a default theme of purple. Most of that is done on the app on start. So if I just expand that out, I've put comments all over it, so you can go through and get explained how all of it's done. But effectively what we're doing is we're just setting 6 variables, 3 for the color, 3 for the text that complement those colors, and then a default label color. I'll tell you why the default label color in a second, and then whether or not it's dark mode. So that's all we do. So all I did was set these colors to what was my purple theme over here, and that was it. That sets it to a default. So if I go into like the home screen, this is the one out purple. I didn't show the home screen earlier, sorry about that. And you can go back and set it to a different theme if you want, and it will pop that up. But then as soon as my app on start runs, it will default to that purple. So the loading screen itself is another additional thing I wanted to give people help with, and that was, I want the screen to show you that things are loading and to set your expectations before you get into the app. So the idea was, on the app timer, there's a timer in the screen, and the timer will either navigate when the data finishes loading or when the timer finishes. So this runs for the length of the timer, or the data loads beforehand, in which case it navigates. How did I do that? I mean, obviously this is pretty crazy that you can do this out the box, but how did I do that? So if we look at a copy of an MS app. So I've got 2 different blank MS apps here. Now, if anyone, and none of you have used it before, Power Apps has an unofficial tool called the theme editor. And with the theme editor, you can choose the colors of objects and create a default theme. But it's only a default theme, and it's static because it's set to these RGBA values. So my theory was, okay, if we're able to use an app like this to create a theme, and you can save it as a separate file that can then be imported, they must be doing some into the file which allows you to do that. So it's true, they are, and there is. So there's one that's made from the theme editor here. Now, something you may not know, MS app files are actually archives, so they're just a .zip file. disguised as a .ms app. So you can open that up and see all sorts of content inside. Now, the one from the theme editor has a flat structure, whereas if I went and created a blank app from the editor, it's got folders and items within those folders. So what I did notice was this themes.json file, JSON is JavaScript object notation, that appears in these two places, and they are different sizes. And I had a look through them, and it turns out that if you open up that themes, looks like a mess initially. We use Visual Studio Code's Beautify extension, and it'll format JSON for you automatically, which is super useful. And I saw that your default theme is essentially set as a series of JSON items. So we got primary colors, backgrounds, C is for color, few more down here. This bracketed thing here is an array. You can set default arrays, for example. Figure is environment variable, but I've, working off guesstimates here, but that's for like font weight or alignment or that kind of thing. N for number. And so I thought, okay, there must be a way, if they're able to change this default theme for when you import an app, there must be a way for me to do that. And there is. You just change these and you can create whatever you want out of them. But I wanted it to be dynamic. So my initial thought was I'm going to change it to T for a text variable, import it, and then have the app do some conditional logic. If this thing is equal to text color 1, then make the color black or whatever it is. But what actually happened was when I imported it this way, it changed those T's into X's. So when I saved it down afterwards, it's showed as X, which variable. But you can't import with X. You have to use T. So once I'd done that and I imported with T and I gave it a value like 1, that then interpreted that as variable 1 as a variable. Doing that, I was able to then create all sorts of custom items. So let me go down further inside. Inside this themes.json, somewhere down here. Default button style. So all the controls by default are mapped out here as items, and you can change essentially everything. So I noticed that this is the one we generated from the theme editor app. It uses palette.primaryColor1, which you don't see in a normal app that you save from the editor. You just see the RGBA value referenced up here. So that led me to believe, okay, I can change it to whatever I want, really. Give it all sorts of names. I could call it Sancho cool variable if I wanted to, and it would interpret it as a variable as long as when I reference it lower down, as long as I reference it here as palette.Sancho cool variable, it'll recognize it and set it to whatever I've given it above. So you could have thousands of additional properties here. And that also made me realize that it's unlikely that doing this is going to break Power Apps, because the theme editor that the team released themselves does this already. So that's one thing to note. So now, okay, cool. Got that. You got the referencing. We've got everything set to variables. Then it was the really, really, really slow and painful process of setting each one of these individual properties down the bottom here to red. I set every single thing one by one to red, because it turns out, as I mentioned earlier about the default label is used all over the place inside these insert screens. So that's a default label, but it's been given a specific X, Y value and width and height. So if you change it too much or change it to something that's not compatible, which is why I had to work out the dark, medium and light for all of these things, then in screens like the meeting screen, these are all different default labels. So they end up using different properties and having different widths. And so there's a lot you can fiddle with. And if you're not worried about the default screens, you can literally change everything. I've done examples where I've changed the XY default coordinates for controls, the width, the height, the alignment. Every single one of those controls is controllable from inside this JSON file. So that's the absolute control. Okay, so what you can do is if you extract out that MSApp file, you can actually edit all the properties inside it. So there's a properties.json, which has the app name, the author, all sorts of nice things. You don't want to change some of these, but there are some interesting ones you can change, such as a test I was doing last night. You can change the default data source count to 5,000 instead of 2,000. And because it imports it with that value, it kind of treats it that way. It's very weird. Then what you can also do is you edit the app using all these properties, and you can actually do manual insertion of controls and screens. So if I get rid of that and open up this screen.json and save it as inside that extracted folder in controls, it is.
And that's the key right there, right? You never actually unzip that zip file and re-zip it. You put files back into the original zip file.
Well, that was how I used to do it, but within the last few days, I've actually gotten a better way to do it. So this thing it's got a unique control ID of 4, so I saved it as 4.json. So that is now a second screen. Let me just make sure it's got the right, so it's called cat screen. So in this blank app now, what I did was I used, I think Gabbers, he added a bit of PowerShell that you can actually use, and then I modified that so you can just run it and go, what do you want the app to be called? I want it to be called Amazing App. It will just recompile this whole folder into a .ms app, and then I can go open and open up that app, and there we go, there's your inserted screen. And then I do the same with a button and insert it into this. At the bottom here, it's got children, so that's where you see your children items within a parent that is the screen. We paste in that button, which has unique ID 5, so the unique IDs have to be numerical as you go through. And then you look for its parent. Parent is set to screen 2, which is what it was called before, but we changed it to cat screen. Save that, and we do that again. So let's get rid of that. And if I import that,
now, Sancho, have you talked with Microsoft about this at all? Have they kind of said, yeah, you're safe to do this and it won't break?
I spoke with a few people on the team, Manuela Pietla, Mehdi Slawi, and they've not explicitly said don't do this, because the app they use, the theme editor, actually does this just in a different form. So it doesn't do the inserting screens, but it essentially changes the JSON in the file in order to give you that default theme. That's what it does. So what I'm doing is just an extension of what they were already doing with the theme editor.
Yeah.
And yeah, so now
I've hacked similar things in there before, and I've received the same feedback, kind of like, hey, it is, yeah, we've done that kind of thing before too. You have to just be careful what you're doing, but it does work.
Yeah, I mean, if you, for example, if you break the JSON and create the file again, it just won't import. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this. It just says error importing file, and then you have to go backtrack and find where you made that error. So that's, I mean, for this kind of thing where you're inserting screens and buttons, I wouldn't suggest everyone do this unless you want to do like an ALM or like really get into building apps programmatically. But for using the template, just take what I built, and for example, if you put a new screen in and put a bunch of different labels and just set them to like primary color 1, 2, 3, that's how I created these menu examples. All these are is a gallery. in the back of the gallery is a background which is set to one of the primary colors, secondary color, and then all the other ones are just based on those primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. So I just built these using those 3 colors. All it is a gallery. So yeah, I'd say for entry-level developers, just take the template I built, change the colors to what the colors you want to use, and then just build based on the tricolor method of primary, secondary, or tertiary colors. If you want to get more advanced, then yeah, pick apart the actual .ms app. I just wanted to show how I did that, because everyone's always like, whoa.
Well, there was a lot of that in the chat room. Yeah, like, what? Are you kidding me? This is amazing. Yeah, really awesome. Love it. Love watching this one. This is going to help out a ton of people. You know, the point I was making about the zip file, maybe you've seen something different. Whenever I've modified something in the zip file before, I've had to leave the zip file intact, pull out just the file I want, modify it, and then actually put it back into the zip file.
Yeah.
I found if I extract the zip file, modify the files, and then re-zip it, even if I give it the same file name, there's something that is getting done inside of that zip file when the Power Apps team makes it on their server, and it won't import if I zip it myself. Did you run into the same thing?
I can answer that. So what happens is when you use a function like WinZip or 7-zip, it does the deflate function on the actual folders and other items inside the zip. Whereas if you use PowerShell, it ends up making a file that looks identical to the one that you would save down locally. So it doesn't do the deflate function and change the CRCs and all that on the actual folders and some of the items.
Yeah.
And thank you, Daniel. Yes, that was a trick, a test I was doing last night. I agree. Don't change it to 5,000. That was just a test I was doing last night.
That's funny. You know, that might be a helpful video or blog on how to just re-zip with your PowerShell that you're using to do that. I have a lot of people I know reach out to me off my video I have on YouTube on how do you hack the manifest to change the background color. And I get comments every single week on people going, I re-zipped it, it won't import.
Yeah.
And
so on the actual, I've put it up on the sample now. There's a link to my GitHub.
Oh, is there?
Where I've just uploaded the .ps1 PowerShell file, so you can just run that from the folder.
Perfect.
It's really only 2 lines.
You just have to know the magic 2 lines of code, right?
So and I got that thanks to Gabs on the Power Apps community forums, because he provided the initial PowerShell that I worked with for that.
That's awesome. Very good. Lots of folks really excited about this one. Thanks for sharing it. That's the first time I've seen you do that. That's really neat. What a cool app. Very good.
See the really good stuff.
How long did it take you to do that? We got an estimate of 3,000 hours here.
Ooh.
Or 3,000 coffees, actually.
Let's just say
he never answers that question. I've asked him quite a few.
Yeah.
A lot of, let's just say a lot of evenings over a few months.
That's cool. That is really cool. Appreciate you taking the time to do it and share it with all of us today.
My pleasure.